It's Way Up with Angela Yee. I'm Angela Yee, and I am very excited to be joined today by Natasha Alford, who is many things, but first off, happy Mother's Day.
Thank you so much.
You know,
feels so good to be part of that club of mamas just trying to make it every day.
One of the most important jobs that a person can have, amongst other things that you do. But you are a CNN political analyst, but also the VP of Digital Content and Senior Correspondent at the Griot.
Yeah.
And you have multiple degrees. You know, but also an author. Let's not forget that.
Yes,
American
I wrote a book.
Negra. Am I saying it right?
You're saying it right. Actually, I was advised when I was coming up with this book idea, like, be careful with the title. People might be a little afraid of the title, but you said it right. And that was the hope, that people would learn to say it and learn what it means.
Right, because, I want you to talk about this because for me, I'm a person who's, I'm half Chinese and I'm also half West Indian. And so whenever I would go get my hair done at the Dominican salon, I would have to explain because they always thought I was Dominican. So I would have to say, soy china y negra.
Yeah.
And let them know that, because, I can speak a little Spanish because I'm from New York and, you have to come up speaking some Spanish, I think, here. But I always had to explain that. That's why when I saw this, American Negra, that's automatically I knew how to pronounce it.
It's so relatable because a lot of us are asked that question, what are you? And I think that is what sent me on this journey to be like, well, who am I? But also, what did I need to know back then to actually love myself, to accept myself? And it takes time. So whoever reads this book is really going on a journey of self-discovery that I hope is relatable to a lot of people. A lot of people come from multi-ethnic families. This is more normal in America today and will soon be part of the majority. So I thought it was important to talk about what it's like to live between multiple cultures.
I think that timing-wise, this is also a great time for us to have this conversation, watching everything that just transpired with Kendrick and Drake, too. Because I think part of that battle was Kendrick telling Drake, you can't use the N-word, right? Because he is half white and half black. I want to know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think it's this idea of using blackness when it's commercially advantageous to you. People have an issue with that. And it's about being authentic, right? And so I think that there are people who see Drake sort of almost step into different cultures and sort of assume, right? He gives you that sound. One time, it's
patois.
Afro beats and then it's patois. And it's like, I think there's a way to do it that pays homage, but then there's this line of, are you exploiting people? And I think for me, my bigger question with the whole Drake thing was really related to gender, because there were so many women who we were part of his early fans. Like, we made him really popular, but the music has taken this turn more recently, sort of in a dark space, like really embracing a lot more misogynistic kind of tropes and ideologies. So I think for me, that was the thing where I was starting to feel like, damn, does Drake love us? Like, does he love, the women who put him on? But I think it's a question we're all asking about, who has the right to. And what's interesting, Angela, this Lala Bad Bunny interview, did you see that?
Where she was on the red carpet and she was able to fluidly go in between English and Spanish. Yeah. And she did a great job.
She did, but there were some people who thought she didn't do good enough.
Oh.
Right? So even though there were all these people like, oh, look at Lala. Like, she is... This is an example of an Afro-Latina. This is an example of diaspora, right? There were people like, but does she really speak Spanish? Well, how come she didn't, respond more in Spanish? Like, there's always somebody trying to gatekeep. Yeah, and tell you that you aren't what you are. So I think that's the flip side, the negative flip side of trying to tell somebody, who they aren't, when clearly, like, that is their culture. And I think that's part of, what the book tries to do as well, is to raise the visibility of Black Latinas.
I think that you were fortunate to have both parents that helped you embrace both parts of your culture, because your mom's Puerto Rican and you had a quinceañera. Quinceañera. I'm trying to pronounce this right. Quinceañera.
Yeah.
And so that's when you turned 15 years old, right? And that was something that you wanted to do. As a matter of fact, I can't believe you chose that over a car.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of crazy.
Your
mom
said you either could have a car or you could have this quinceañera.
Yeah.
And so you chose that. Why did you choose that over a car?
I think I really wanted to have this rite of passage those are important aspects of culture, right? These moments that you look back and say, this is something I share with other people. And so for our family, you know, a lot of the women in our family had a quinceañera. My mom didn't. She's from the Bronx. You know, my grandmother worked a lot of jobs. She didn't really have a lot of money. So my mom didn't want one because financially her family couldn't do it. But she wanted to give me that experience, and I did it. But it was a very African-American, like, quinceañera. Like, we were
girls,
salsa. Right. And we were doing salsa. Everybody was like, half the squad was like Black American. You know, we're listening to Jay-Z and Little Mo. But I tried to show that that's what it's like to live between multiple cultures. You can't deny any side of you. And there are a lot of us out there. Think about it. We've got Cardi B and Offset. Like, they have a daughter. They have a son. That's an example of children who are going to grow up with different ethnicities or cultures. And those are Black children. So what does it mean to live at that intersection and have some people tell you, oh, well, you're not enough of this or you're not that? And what's so important is that people understand, and I think you get this, we're Black women no matter what, right? Even if we have, you know, another ethnicity sort of mixed in America, people see us as Black. So if you are raising Black children, you need to know that you are raising Black children and teach them to be proud of themselves, but also fight against some of those messages that will teach them that they aren't enough. And I think for Latinas in particular, this is important because we have a Spanish language media that often shows white and light skin and fair skin as what is beautiful. Even in Puerto Rico right now, they just passed a law against natural hair discrimination. Oh. Because Black Puerto Ricans...
We kind of had that here, the Crown Act.
Right. And that's the Puerto Rican version of it because there were Black Puerto Ricans who were being told they had to cut their locks off, that they couldn't, their natural hair wasn't professional. I mean, this is in 2024. This is still happening. So I think, you know, within Latin American culture, there's this reckoning that needs to happen around race. And the book tries to educate a little bit in terms of history and why we're in this place.
A lot of things do come back to the hair, and you talk about pelo malo, bad hair, and your own hair journey too, of you wanting to have your hair be silky and straight, and the perms that you had to go through to get to that space. But then, and I went through this too, right, where I would straighten my hair as much as I could, but it would get so frizzy as soon as it got a little humid or damp, and all of a sudden, you know, because I started off going to public school, and then I went to private school, and in private school, everybody wanted like this stick straight hair. There weren't a lot of Black kids in the school, so what you saw, what was considered beautiful, was that, like, you know, long straight hair. And so I never got a perm, but then when I got a little older, I got this thing, this treatment that made my hair straight and shiny, so easy to take care of. Because that's part of what it is too. It's so much easier when your hair is straight and you don't have to, like, you know, worry about getting it tangled up and things like that. But it really did damage my natural hair curls for a long time.
It took years before I saw my natural pattern, which is crazy, where, you know, there's so many little girls who don't even see their natural texture until later. And that is conditioning, right? We're conditioned to do that. You're talking about going to Dominican salon. I mean, I would go to Dominican salons because it's like, oh, they know how to get the hair the straightest.
But your scalp be burning and everything.
But
like,
they gonna get it straight. But where does that come from, Angela? If we actually look at history, we think about the colonial era and the fact that there was slavery in Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico and all of these places, and to look whiter, to present whiter, to have straighter hair, that's an advantage in a society that's racist against Black people. So we figured out a way to cope, we figured out a way to navigate, but it's okay to question and say, you know, do I have to buy into all of this? And so even just now in my 30s, am I getting comfortable with wearing my hair curly? Like, that's how long it took.
And thank God we have all these products, because that was also an issue. Having the right products for hair with texture, to having the curly hair, natural hair products in the store to even be able to purchase. You know, that we didn't used to have that. That was a big deal.
The market has finally realized that we're here. And I think that's part of these conversations. You show people, look, we're here. We got buying power. We matter. You can't ignore us. Like, we don't have to conform. My favorite story is in Puerto Rico in the aftermath of the hurricanes, because there was no electricity. You know, people didn't have their straightening tools and stuff. There were a lot of women who discovered their natural hair texture because they had to. And then it was like, oh, wait, I actually like this. So, you know, these are important conversations.
Now, your parents also play a really large part of your story. Your mom, you put a lot of the letters that your mom wrote you. But one thing she always told you, I want to ask you about this. Even as you were getting all these accolades and achievements and learning to be a great speaker which I want to touch on too, because that's so important. She would tell you to stay humble.
Yeah.
Even when people were praising you, it was always like, okay, stay humble. Oh, she's just a regular girl. I want to know what your thoughts are on that, looking back at it today.
Yeah, I think some of it was genuine. I think my mother always wanted me to remember we're a working class family.
We're not better than
We're
anybody.
not better than anybody, right? My dad, he was a custodian for years. He cleaned bathrooms. My mother was a public school teacher, and she had a guidance counselor who told her she should be a secretary because she was Puerto Rican, right? Those are the things you come up against when you come from marginalized groups, people who tell you that you can't be anything. So she wanted me to stay grounded. But I think also sometimes it's a protective mechanism. I think that in this sort of, race-based society that we live in, we don't want young people of color to get too full of themselves because we know the obstacles that they're going to face.
They could take it away.
Right. They're going to take it away from you. We don't want you to get disappointed. So sometimes we might shoot down your dreams. I remember telling my dad, I'm moving to New York, Daddy. Like, I might get this job at the Griot. And he was like, all right, we'll see what happens. Like, how many times do we do that to our children out of love because we don't want them to be disappointed?
Them, yeah.
But then you also are limiting their sense of possibility. So that's what I wrestle with in the book. Sometimes the tensions I had with my family. You'll see a scene in the book where I get into Harvard and the reaction is not like the Instagram videos.
School in Cambridge.
Yeah. Everybody's like cheering like, oh, my baby got into this school. It was not that reaction.
Right. How much is it going to cost?
It was that.
Can we afford that?
Right. And that's a
real thing.
White school. Are you going to be the only black girl there? So I think that this book, as much as it is about culture and being black and Latina, it's also about the American dream. And what is the path towards the American dream? When we tell young people to go after their education, are we really giving them the support once they get there? Because just because you got into Harvard, you got into Yale, it doesn't mean you know how to navigate those spaces.
Right.
There's a lot of sort of unofficial rules that will make you a success or make you a failure. And also, why do we define those places as being signs of success, right? I wanted to go to an HBCU. I wanted to go to Spelman. We just couldn't afford to send me there, So it raises these questions that I think we should ask.
And another thing, since we brought that up, because you did go to Princeton also, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Actually
2
got
weeks
your
from
master's
graduating.
in public policy.
Thank you.
Still getting that education, which is not cheap to do.
Yeah.
You also went to Northwestern, right?
Yeah.
And to Harvard. You're not playing any games when it comes
I
to
like to be a student.
I mean, this is wow. And I always believe in whether or not it's going to school to get a degree, but education, right? Whether you're getting a certification in something or you're trying to learn more about something and getting educated, taking courses. I'm a big fan of that because I feel like we should always be students of something. We don't ever know it all, right? But what I wanted to ask you was, with all of these conversations about DEI happening right now, and with schools saying, okay, now we don't have to do certain things when it comes to the admissions process. Clearly, you deserve to be there. You belong there. And people are very confused sometimes about what that means. They think if they see a student of color on a campus, that it's some type of affirmative action, right? So I want to see what your thoughts are on a lot of things being rolled back now.
Well, first, I think that affirmative action has worked in a lot of ways to help non-people of color.
Women.
Why don't we talk
White
about
women.
that, right? Okay, even think about it. I have studied policy this past year, and the things I've learned about the ways that certain people were set up for success and others were denied opportunity, it's insane. People want you to think that we are somehow a problem. People of color, we don't work hard enough. We don't want nothing in life. And then you learn about the ways that we were denied. The GI Bill, African-American veterans who served, not being able to actually get mortgages to live in certain neighborhoods while white veterans were able to do that. Think about that. People who tried to get into schools to actually get their education and they were denied because of segregation. So I don't believe in sort of ahistorical takes around this. And I think a lot of people are talking about this without actually knowing the history. And they want Black people to feel shame about programs that are about creating equity and righting past wrongs. I don't care if somebody doesn't think that I deserve to go to Harvard or deserve to go to Princeton. I know I deserve to go there. There's a legacy of people who came before me, who fought so that I could be there. And my people helped build this country, right? And we never got reparations.
Right.
We never got 40 acres acres.
Things were taken away.
Things were taken away.
Land.
And so the least you could do, if I'm pursuing my education, I want to be somebody, I want to contribute, is to support me in that. And please know I'm qualified. This is not about putting unqualified people in position. It's about making sure there's checks and balances so that they aren't denied opportunities that they should have.
Man, listen, you make me want to go back to school myself.
It's never too late. By the way, Princeton was free. Just to be clear, Princeton paid for everything.
Oh, they did?
That's why I went back to school.
Oh,
I just
makes
was
sense.
like, I can't say no to this. At this point in my life, I'm making my own education. We go to school for so long, someone else tells us what to learn. I looked up, I looked at the world, I said, I'm always talking about problems. I want to know, how do we fix the problems in America and beyond? And so that's what I was doing. I was going back and getting the education I always wanted.
I saw you were there also on campus while there were hunger strikes going on that just ended yesterday.
Yeah.
And so these were the anti-Israel hunger strikes. And, students have been protesting on campuses all over right now nationally. So I want to get your thoughts on that, because some people feel like, I've seen a lot of differing views on what's happening and students weighing in and being active, which I think is a positive thing. But I want to see what you think.
Well, one thing about young people is that sometimes they have a moral compass that the grown folks don't have, because we have things to lose, right? And there are a lot of people who are seeing what's happening. They're seeing, innocent civilians who are dying, children who are dying, women who are dying, and they're saying, this is not right. But there are people who use that and sort of exaggerate, right, and say that, this is about anti-Semitism, this is about anti-Zionism, or whatever it is. But I see people who are taking folks who are simply saying this is too much. Like, innocent people shouldn't be dying. And they are blanketing them with judgment and sort of this sort of mass stereotype of all the students. When I was on campus, I interviewed many Jewish students who were part of the Gaza Solidarity Encampment. And they were saying, not in my name, that I disagree with some of the policies, the way that Israel is, carrying out this military operation, and I don't want it to be done in my name. Those students were anti-Semitic. They were Jewish, right? But if you were look at some of the coverage on the news, it was as if everyone was being painted with a broad brush. So I think it's important for us as media. Our job is to be fair. It's to, make sure that we're talking to everybody so we can tell the most accurate version of the story of what's playing out. And I just felt like, there were certain instances in which there were just mass sort of stereotypes being painted about everybody. And as somebody who's literally on a college campus, I can tell you that from what I saw, much of this was motivated by concern about the humanitarian crisis at Princeton.
And it's interesting because it depends on what media outlet you're looking at. I was looking at an article about Seinfeld was speaking at Duke.
Yeah.
And they said some of the students walked out and they were mad and they were, but then other people, depending on which article you read, they said a few students.
Right.
And they can make it seem like it's way more people involved than what you think.
And there's a diversity of views. When I was covering the Princeton protests, there were counter protesters there who were holding pictures of hostages and saying, bring the hostages home. And it's like, you have to, I chose journalism because I have empathy. I think I have a heart for people. And so I can understand the pain of people who are saying, my loved ones are gone, I want them back, and also understand that there are people who are saying, innocent people shouldn't be dying, right? We shouldn't be carpet bombing people. Those stories, all of those stories have to be told in this moment.
All right, the other big thing that's happening right now here in New York, Donald Trump.
We still talking about him all these years later.
Still, and I see some of his supporters are saying, he needs to get out of this trial and get back on the campaign trail.
Oh, he's on the campaign trail, honey.
This is part of his campaign.
That's it. That's what he's doing.
According to him, he's being targeted. But what I don't understand is, why don't people understand that what he did, he broke the law. We got the person that actually participated, that was down with him for 10 years, testifying in court, talking about what happened. And a lot of people think he could potentially win this election. Yeah. And I see a lot of negativity. I'm watching some of these campaigns already and some of these advertisements on television, and it is concerning to me as a person who wants to make sure that people do vote. I see so many things that are not true on social media that's being spread, that's getting, millions of views. I want to know what your thoughts are about what's happening with Donald Trump. Do you think that this is something that he could win or that'll get tossed out?
Well, absolutely. I mean, are you talking about the case or the
this
election?
Case first. And
okay.
Then...
So in terms of this case, right, I think it's important for people to understand that if you want the law applied, right, you want fairness, it doesn't matter who we're talking about, right?
The president does not get immunity.
Exactly.
A former president.
Exactly. We've seen this before. Think about the Nixon era. The only reason that Nixon didn't go to jail was because Gerald Ford pardoned him, okay? Because he made a decision and said that the country can't undergo this. But even Nixon was held to a certain standard. So it's important we understand that the law is the law.
And this is about hush money.
It's about hush money. It's
Right.
about intentionally, covering up a payment and knowing that from a campaign finance standpoint that you were crossing lines, you were blurring lines, okay? And so...
Feels clear-cut to me.
I think that you have to let the case play out, but Donald Trump is using this moment as a campaign moment. He's going out, he's talking to the press at the end of each day.
Like he's being
and he's
wronged.
saying, I'm the victim. And there are people who are buying into it. What I think also is that people are so overwhelmed with information, they can't keep track of anything. So they're like, okay, there's how many cases, there's how many charges, and at a certain point they start to tune out.
Right.
So that's my fear as a journalist, as a political analyst, is that even all this work we're doing to keep people informed, that they're not processing it because they're just overwhelmed and they're over it. In terms of why he's winning in certain polls, one, it's important to remember these polls are samples of the American public.
Right.
They are
Small.
not.
I feel like the polls are never reflective of what actually happens. When you
Think
see
about it. Have you picked
and
up the
super
phone?
early.
Have
Yeah.
you picked up the phone and been asked to answer this question? Chances are you probably haven't.
Never.
So it's not over till it's over. At the same time, President Biden should heed the criticism that he's getting. The fact that people can't tell you what he did, even though he's done a lot. And so that's a communication issue. That is their responsibility as the administration and office to make sure that they are reaching people where they are.
I feel like that's been a ongoing problem that we have too, because even with President Barack Obama, you hear people say, they'll be like, he didn't do anything, he didn't fight for Black people. But if you I read his very thick book, and
it was a big book.
It was a big book,
very long,
but I thought it was very informative about how government works and all of the obstacles and difficulties that he had, and still tried to manage to get things done. But a lot of things that are shut down is because there is a system that's in place.
Checks and balances, right? And Angela, I think what you're pointing to is very important. How many of us actually know the different branches of government? Do we know that, President Biden isn't a king? Any president isn't a king. There is Congress, right? There is SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States. You see what they've done with abortion rights. You see that certain legislation President Biden had got blocked by just two people in his party, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. And so these were key moments in which change could have happened, but because there were folks who were, had their own agendas, it didn't happen. And so every piece of this puzzle has to work in order for America to work. And my concern is people want quick fixes. Like, democracy is messy. There's give and take. There's fighting. There's pressure. There's protests. Authoritarians, they just say they want something done and they break rules to make it happen, or they change the rules entirely. And so you may think Donald Trump is going to come in, he's going to fix everything, but what is he breaking in the process? What are you losing in the process on the other side? He's threatened to go after journalists. He's threatened to deport students who are, quote, anti-American. What does that mean? Right now we're talking about Gaza. What if that means Black Lives Matter in another breath, right?
And he encourages violence.
These are all things that I think, as people are like, oh, but the eggs are high, and my rent is high. I have deep empathy for that, but also, have we asked the question of why things are the way they are? We got hedge funds buying up single family homes so people can't compete who want to buy a house. The inflation. It's not just the president's responsibility to try to bring inflation down. Supply chains were disrupted. That was a global problem that affected us.
And we still are seeing the results of that.
And we're still seeing it. And yet some people are saying that was all President Biden's doing. Or even the fact that unemployment was starting to go down before Trump even stepped into office. And he benefited from that.
Right.
But he's running around telling people that he brought unemployment down for African Americans when it was already on the decline.
Right.
So there's so much information to keep up with that I worry that people gravitate towards the loudest and the simplest voice, which often is a Donald Trump, when the truth is much more nuanced, it's much more complicated.
Well, Natasha, I hope that you come up here a lot more frequently.
I would love to.
Because I do think it's important to have actual journalists, right, come on to discuss what's happening, because I feel like there's voices that get you very confused and muddled, and those voices can be elevated, but I want to make sure that we continue to elevate people who are really doing this work, that study it, that understand policy, because this is it's always a critical time. But I'm not going to lie, right now I feel like I want to make sure that I'm doing something to make sure that I'm doing my part. And I think that's what everybody needs to do. It's not just posting on social media, but it's like you do have to vote. You do have to make sure you know what you're voting for, who you're voting for, what you support, what you need to make happen, and participate and be a part of that process.
I have deep empathy for everyone. I'm a mother. I'm working, multiple jobs.
She's a mother.
I was in school this past year. Sometimes it feels like we just don't have the time. But this is our future. This is our children's future. And democracy is not about the politician. They are a steward of our country, right? These are our rights. This is our land. These are our tax dollars. And so we put people in place to look over, right, what belongs to us. They work for us.
They work for us.
Make them work for you. That's right. So even with everything we have going on, even if it's just taking a moment to listen, to read, to double check a source, this is the work that we must do. Our ancestors did it so we could benefit.
Go to some town halls, go to some local meetings,
Listen, they did it, so we have to keep doing it.
And you know what? American Negra is out right now. There were so many other things that I had that I wanted to talk about in this book. You know what? Let's do one of them.
Okay.
Because you get personal on certain things that happened when you were younger. And there was a time in high school, there was an older guy.
Oh, gosh. Oh, yeah.
They used to hang around the high school. And you being young and innocent, all right, ended up, going back to his house with him. Yeah. Thank God nothing happened to you.
Thankfully.
But I was thinking about that situation, about how many times people will blame a woman or blame a young girl and call her fast for being in that situation. You were a virgin. You ended up at his house. You were scared. He was on top of you, and fortunately he was like, all right, this is too much. Let me just take you home. Yeah. And nothing happened. But I just thought about how many times as young girls we make decisions that we wish we wouldn't have made and then end up, in a terrible situation that could have gone, awful.
Well, one thing is our culture is so fear-based, our young people are afraid to tell us what's going on. So we think we'll get punished if we ask certain questions or talk about certain relationships that are developing. And all you do is you just push the activity into the quiet, right? Into the dark where it can't be seen or monitored. So I believe in creating a culture where we do talk about these things with our young people. Second, I think there is this, we're seeing it even with the rap beef we were just talking about, how normal is it for people to go after young girls? That's just normal. We had older guys driving around the high schools all the time. And young girls think they're flattered by it. They think it means, this means I'm smart. This means I'm mature. And we have to put our young girls up on game. No, that's part of the game.
Right.
To make you think that you are special in some way when really what grown man will want.
He's a pervert.
Anything to do with a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, right? But I wanted to be honest about these things because I think people just think, Harvard, she's on CNN. People project a lot of things. They assume they know what your life is. And I had the life of, it was like a regular Black girl growing up in upstate New York. This is what we were dealing with. Older adult men driving by the high school trying to pick us up.
That is not normal.
That is not normal. So I wanted to talk about that to, free us up to share the lessons we've learned and hopefully, it inspires somebody. I think it's a great coming of age story for sure.
It is.
If it's a
I learned
young
a lot about
person.
You.
You
Because I've known you for a long time.
I know,
and I've
right?
admired all the work that you've been doing for,
Thank you.
Over a decade now,
wow.
I want to say. So
thank you. You were a part of my journey. You were one of the first people to help me do a national radio interview back when I was on the Breakfast Club. And thank you for being somebody who opens doors for others and doesn't close them behind you. So
well, hopefully we do a whole lot more together because anything you need, I'm here. So,
thank you, sis. I appreciate it.
I'm gonna be holding you to that same standard.
Yes, absolutely. We in it together.
It is a critical time, so I do want to make sure as we're on this platform right now, now that you're agreeing that you'll be back.
I will be back.
All right. Well, guys, make sure you pick up this book. You are going to love it. It's amazing. If you have, children, I think this is a great book for them to read too, for the youth. But for somebody like myself, seeing your whole journey, seeing where you are today, it was definitely something special to be able to read. American Negra is out right now. Natasha Alford, thank you so much.
Thank you, Angela.
Way up.